Right. Well, first of all, thank you for the re-invite, gang. I'm glad you must have enjoyed the Home Guard talk so much.
Yeah.
Very cool. So, when I spoke initially, it was agreed to do D-Day and the South Wales borders. However, after short notice, I've been asked, could I change it because it's VE week? Could I change it? So what I've done is I'm giving the presentation that I give the primary schools, okay? But, alright, and the comprehensive schools, so it just ups it a little bit. Right, so all it does basically is just, and you're all too young probably, is your grandparents and parents would have been in 1940s, okay? So those who are, it might obviously recognise somebody in the odd photograph later on, but I said I'm going to spin through this because you know who I am because I gave a talk last time, okay? So, right, okay, so the way I usually start is World War II and how it started, okay, and then I'll move into Swansea, Gower, but predominantly Swansea for this area, alright? So as we know, I'm not going to, because you all know how World War II started, but it's because of World War I, alright? But it's not called World War I to have a World War II. It was called the Great War, alright? And it was the war to end all wars. But as a result of that, all the politics and things that have happened because of the Great War resulted in World War II, alright? So as we know, Adolf Hitler came into power in 1933 and he became the Chancellor, right? And of course he was a corporal during the Great War, so he'd seen all the horrors, etc., which will lead on later for my talk. But he and millions of Germans weren't happy with the way the war ended, alright? Yes, they were starving, yes, they were getting short of manpower, and it had to be stopped. However, the manner in which it had stopped, nobody agreed with it, and obviously that was the biggest grievance. So when he took power, he decided we'll start taking the land back that we lost because of the Treaty of Versailles and what the so-called Allies had taken back. So he decided, right, okay, we'll take the Rhineland to start with, and nothing was done. Then he decided we'll do the Sudetenland, which is the top of Austria. We didn't do anything again. Bear in mind, folks, it's like history repeating itself now in the 21st century, okay? So he's then gone into Austria, he's gone to Czechoslovakia, to a point where Neville Chamberlain was the Prime Minister before the war started. And again, he fought in the Great War, so he knew the horrors of what would be coming. So he's done his best, because obviously he's had an overcast with a shadow when you listen to history, but when you put yourself into 1939-38, you've got to think, right, okay, well, we've all seen war. We don't want war, so we're trying to do our best to try and stop it. So he goes over to Berlin in 1938, speaks with Adolf Hitler, says, look, you can have what you've just taken, but you're not having any more, we just want peace. And Adolf Hitler said, yes, fine. We'll sign the appeasement, which is what has been signed. So then he flies back. Bear in mind, it's not 21st century, breaking news, Sky News, jumps off the plane and he's there live. He then obviously comes to the airport and he waves a bit of paper to say there's peace in our time. But as we know, Adolf Hitler was lying through his teeth and he had no chance. So what he basically said was, and then he threatened to go into Poland. Well, of course, France and Britain said, look, we've told you you can't take anything else. If you go into Poland, we'll declare war on you. Now Adolf Hitler basically said, well, he's going to pull the wool over my eyes because I've gone into all these countries that all talk much like what the certain countries are today, and nothing's going to happen. So Germany goes into Poland on the 1st of September, and the 3rd of September, Britain and France declare war. Okay, so that's the reason why we've gone into there. Now, as you know, to your left, this is Adolf Hitler, and in 1940, so in April, May 1940, Chamberlain has had enough now and he resigns, right? He's a peacetime Prime Minister. We were losing the war and Winston Churchill comes in just in time for the Dunkirk evacuations, all right? And it was a close run thing whether we were going to surrender or not, but he came into office and he stood up and said no. So he then became leader in 1940. I'm not going to talk about the Home Guard because I spoke about that earlier on in the last talk. So basically, I'll go through this quickly, right? So 1st September 39, Germany invades, as I said. Britain and France declare war on the 3rd. Dunkirk then is May 26th to the 4th of June 1940. And then we've got the Battle of Britain, which you all know the RAF stopped the Germans from coming over. Swansea Blitz, February 19th to 21st, and the morning of the 22nd. All right, even though Swansea had a lot of blitzes and a lot of bombings, which I'll talk about a bit later on, the biggest one was on that date. Then, of course, we'll move quickly on with Germany invades Russia, because we then finally stand up to him. Then we go into the 7th, this is where it becomes a world war, alright? So you've got Italy, Germany and Japan become very good friends, causing an axis, alright, which is their old joint. And Japan decides, right, well, we'll now attack America. Hitler does the very silly thing, once America declares war on Japan, he declares war on America. America never declared, right, so Roosevelt never said to Germany, we're now at war with you. Hitler thought, so he went to war. Biggest mistake going, isn't it, at that particular time? And then obviously June the 4th, we've got D-Day, May the 8th, which was last week with Europe, and then obviously VJ with the bomb dropping on August 6th and 9th, okay? Right, okay, the home front. Does anybody know why the home front was called the home front? No? Right, okay, you had the Eastern Front, Western Front, etc. Right, well, the fact you're living in at home, you were still on a front. Because Germany was still coming over with their bombers and with their planes, and they were bombing our city. So it was a war, basically, right? So it was a place of conflict, hence why the home front. All right, and this photograph here, well, first of all, hello to the people on that, I just realised. So there's 3 of you, is it? No, 4 of you. Welcome. So what we've got is, obviously you're all too young to remember this, no doubt. But the home front, okay, so basically we're at war, our cities are being bombed, our industry's being bombed, so this is classed as the home front, okay, where the women get called up, working in the munitions factories, become women's land army, become lumberjills, etc., even drive the buses, things like that, because all the soldiers are going off. So what we've got here is a photograph of 2 brothers and a sister. They've come from, could be London, could be Bristol, could be Cardiff even, could be Liverpool, and they've just come off the train and they're walking up to a farm, and we know it's May 1940. Alright, I don't have to even look at dates of this because we know, because they've got their shorts on, they've got their sleeves wrapped up. So this is when they're coming off, and as you can see, they've got their gas masks next to them. Then what we've got then on your top right is that we've got a mother and a father, alright, which is quite strange because obviously men that age would have been called up for conscription, but you've got the mother, probably sister-in-law, and a baby in the pram with the gas mask on. Then moving quickly over, we've got a hospital, could be Swansea Hospital, but this is going to be one of the ones in London, and they're just practicing gas tests or what have you, right? So they're having a few bits and pieces there, because if you notice, they've got the baby's legs are dangling, all right, and they've got their own gas masks on. And the bottom one there is that evacuees were supposed to have left. However, as we know, as I'll say shortly on, we had a phony war, all right? So from 1939 to May 1940, nothing really happened. A lot happened on sea, and a lot of British and a lot of men were being sunk in the ships and dying with the merchant navy. But as a land battle per se, there was no war. Hence why it was called a phony war. And because it was because nothing was happening, all these mums and dads were thinking, right, okay, we've sent our children off to a farm in the middle of mid Wales down Gower. Nothing's happening. We want our children back. All right. So they had all these millions of kids left, only for most of them to be brought back. And this is a quick picture here of a brother and sister on a gas drill. All right. And obviously the air raid wardens direct them to where the air raid shelter is. Okay. Now this is a colour photo that I managed to source, which is better. I've blown it up for the best I can. All right. Was anybody in one of these? See, I told you you're all too young, see? Yeah, you're all too young to remember. Right, so this is a baby's gas mask, and there's a mum and dad there, and I'll explain to you on how it works, because I've actually got one in the reel there, okay? And then this photograph here, it's got a child with a special mask on. I just pointed out, right, they've got 2 special masks on, and they're practicing their gas mask drills in the school. Now, the reason why we've got all these masks is that gas was used a lot in the Great War, all right? Yeah, front line, but a lot of soldiers either died or were maimed by the gas. And Adolf Hitler was also as a result of being gassed, all right? So he knew the horrors. But unknown to the UK, he was never going to gas the public. Yes, gas was used, and we all know what the gas was used for. But as a general rule of thumb, Hitler was never going to send any gas over to the UK, because he knew what would result in the aftermath of us giving that back to them, and he'd already witnessed it firsthand, the horrors. All right, but the UK didn't know that. So what we've got here is that we've got drills in the schools. Okay. Now I gave a talk. This bottom right, I gave a talk in Puth Call to Newton Primary School back on Thursday. well, I gave this presentation, and that school is one of the few that hasn't been knocked down and a new school been rebuilt. Like there's a lot of schools now are closing and they're rebuilding 21st century ones. Well, this one had exactly the same wooden floors that you can see there. The radiators were exactly the same and fed out to the children, they all dressed up as evacuees. So the photograph is perfect here. So we've got here, is on your left then, we've got the old school desks, and we know it's going to be May 1940 again, and the reason being is obviously they got their shorts on, okay? So they practicing putting their gas masks on. And if you notice, you've got different types. So you've got one here that's got two eyes, and one here we just got the frame. And then the top right hand corner there, you've got a teacher, and she's showing the children how to fit the gas mask on properly, alright? So if you look here, you can see where they've lifted the elastic up to put it under their chin to lift it on, okay? And then the bottom one is obviously a bit more scary, alright? That is air raid bomb training, practicing, alright? Because a lot of schools, especially in Kent and East, wasn't so much here, they were being hit by the German bombs anyway, alright? And children are in class at the time because they're doing daylight bombing, not like night bombing, but they did a bit of daylight bombing. Lone wolves they called, the odd plane would come across, and I'll give you a story about that in Swansea. So they got to practice, so if the bomb lands, all the bricks and all the timber come down, and of course these are, if you remember, these desks haven't changed since when I was in school, alright? So they were solid oak type timber, good to hold and protect you, okay? What I would say is any questions right at the end, alright, and I'll hopefully be able to answer them. So evacuees, as I mentioned, when war was declared, it frightened the British government. They said, right, okay, we got a projected outcome of so many thousands are going to die because of the bombing. Right, let's get all the kids out. So in September, and from September to May 39 to 40, we had a load of children put on trains from the cities and sent out to the rural areas, alright? Even some liners left to go to Canada, alright? So when I give these presentations to the schools, they just pick yourself now, these could be two children, brother and sister, waiting to go onto a cruise liner to be sailed over to Canada where you're going to be safe. However, you're going to be gone for 6 years and not come back to see your family for 6 years. However, that got stopped pretty quick because two liners got sunk by German U-boats. Alright, and the German U-boats didn't know there were children on them. They see these boats, they see we're at war with Britain, and they sunk them, and a lot of children drowned and died. So the liners were stopped. Alright, so there were no more. But these children who had already gone over to Canada have now got to wait 6 years, or just over 6 years, 6 years, 1 month, or a bit longer even, to come back for their families. Alright, so we got here, and all they could take is just what they've had on them. So they would have had perhaps a toy, a book, spare clothing. If they were lucky, might have had an apple given to them, and that's all they would have to themselves. And what would happen then, they'd come off the train, have a little group in the village halls, where they'd be saying, right, okay, brother and sister here, twins there, or you're on your own, and a total stranger will walk through the door, and you'll be told as a child, you're going with Mr. and Mrs. Jones. And that's where you'd be. You could be lucky and have a fantastic family, or as per if you listen to the VE Day 80th with that girl talking from Middlesbrough, she went with a horrible woman who sent her straight to bed. She wet the bed and was sent straight back to Middlesbrough, only to be gone again. So it wasn't as nice and as say my grandparents took on an evacuee from London, and we've become, even now, the families, we've all become good friends, and they've moved to Swansea after the war. So even though he's not a cousin of ours, he's classed as a cousin. Alright? This one, the top right hand corner, is propaganda. Okay? Children are smiling, they've just been given a bag of sweets probably. Alright? And they've got a newspaper. Now when I give the talks to schools, believe it or not many kids know what a newspaper or a comic are these days. Alright? They don't know what a Beano is, don't know what a dandy is, things like that. But during the war, you had the comics, you had the Mickey Mouses, the cartoon characters, okay? And then the bottom right then is obviously they're all waiting to go into a train. You can see the train conductor, and all they've got is what they've got with them, right? There's nothing else, they couldn't take anything else spare. Now this is different, it's not propaganda photographs, alright? Because they're all happy, they're all smiling. Alright, so this is basically when the mums and dads, and this is London, because you've got a WPC with the London police, right, with the Met, and this is going to be September 1939, alright? And the reason why I know that is because it's going to be cold in September, October, November. They haven't got their shorts on, they haven't got their nothing on the knees. They've got their wellies, they've got their thermals on. And again, all they've got is just one toy, a little bag with their gas mask, and if you're lucky, with a suitcase. And on there you had a tag. Alright, as with the other photographs. Can you see the tags on every single child? That had the child's name, date of birth, their parents, and their home addresses, basically. Alright, and so when they went then to the village hall, the people could see that, yeah, we got the two brothers together, got a sister, and they tried not to split them up. Yes, there were cases where a brother went to one farmer's family and a sister went to another, but they generally tried to keep the brothers and sisters and twins, etc., all together. This one, you can see the little girl crying, so this is not a propaganda photo. As we all know, health and medicine was not very good in the inner cities. All right. However, when you come up to the rural areas, food, fresh air, all right, you got a lot better. So what this is a nurse. These children have just obviously come to a community centre before they go with Mrs. Jones, Mrs. Evans, or Mrs. Barrow, whatever the case may be. They get checked. Might have rickets, might have fleas in the hair. You know how it works, nits, isn't it, and things like that. All right. So you get checked out first, and you can see they've all got their little tags on them. And again, we're talking September, October, November, because they've all got gloves and mittens on and big coats. All right, and they're clearly missing their parents, and they don't know what's going to be coming around the corner. All right, and this is another one again, all right, where we've got a boy who's sleeping. They've clearly come off the train, or they're about to go into a train and catch a bus, either back and forth or be picked up, or be told, right, we're walking down to the village hall. And this is a volunteer, look, that meets them off the train to walk them down to the village hall. So they're waiting and waiting and waiting. And again, all they've got, the little girl to your right has got a pillow in her hand. They've just got a bag, one bag each, and that's all they've got. And this one clearly looks like a brother and sister. The horror on these two's faces because they don't know where they're going. Right, you're being pulled away from the mums and dads, and I try to explain when I give this talk in schools. Just picture yourself, yeah, we're 21st century, you're 8, 9 years of age now. Just think, if you're 8, 9 years of age, and you want to see your mum and dad again, all right, for at least 4 years at least, okay? And then this one then, this is a photograph, it's 1944, 1940. Have you heard of the V1, V2 rockets? All right, well they thought because we did the D-Day landings, we're starting to push the Germans back, that we can bring all the children back again. Well, a lot of children died in 1944 and early 1945 because of the V1 and V2 rockets. And this is a lad where a V2 rocket has hit his house in London. His mum and dad are alive, but the house is behind, and all he's got left is his dressing gown and basically a toy without any ears. All right, and that's a famous photograph. There's one or two others of the same lad. And this photograph there is obviously of women volunteers, because all the men now are being called up, all right, to go and fight. And they're basically doing the air raid precautions, or ARP. And they just carry on then. You can see where they've got the... So I remember this thing doesn't show, because I can point it and you'll all see. But you've got the huge roll there, and the small one. That goes onto the street pumps, all right? So it's like the fire service. And you can roll that out, that tube, and then you can do the water, or do you folks remember stirrup pumps? Yeah. All right, you had a bucket, you put a stirrup pump in, and you're pumping away with a little tiny hose, not much pressure to try and put the fire out. Well, that's what they've got there. So they've got the bucket on the right-hand side, and that's the stirrup pump. All right, and again, they're practicing with the gas mask on, because you've got to keep practicing just in case the real thing did happen. And you had to keep the gas mask with you at all times, because Hitler's like with the Home Guard, when I my last talk, he ain't going to tell you when he's coming, or when he's going to be dropping bombs or gas. They had to be with you at all times. Now this is from the last talk as well, right? I like this, which is why I put it in there. This is a Swansea Home Guardsman, all right? And of course they were worried about the paratroopers coming down. And this is from the Evening Post paper, 1941, just after the Swansea Blitz. So it's a defiant cartoon, where you can see Swansea in the back, smoking away where it's all rubble, and then a Home Guardsman, right, well, come on then Germans, we're here waiting for you. Now this is the Swansea part with the Blitz now, alright? Did anybody go to Deneva School? The girls and boys part of it?
Boys and girls.
Right, there's the boys and there's the girls. If you go there now, you've got one door saying girls on it, and you walk another about 4 or 5 yards and there's one for boys. So you're at a boys and girls school there, alright? Now, do you remember the talk I gave you about the incendiary bomb? And I actually showed it to you with the Home Guard?
Yes.
This is the Never School, alright? It's standing, so it's not blown up, so it hasn't been destroyed by any high explosive bombs, but small incendiaries, right? And they basically burn and set on fire. And what's happened here is, because in those days, these buildings are 95% timber, alright? So you come through the slate roof, you hit the timber walls and the roofs, and then it'll set off a little bomb, and then a big heat comes up and starts setting fire to the property. That's what's happened to the Never School there, alright? This, if I can stand by here, because you can see it the other side. If you know town today, that is where Halifax Bank is today, and the Quadrant Shopping Centre is just down there, alright? Greg's and things like that are all there, alright? So this is the Kingsway, alright? And if you look, you can see all the bomb damage, and this line there is supposed to tell people there's an unexploded bomb. However, there's a lot of people clearly not listening to that, and they're walking down, alright? But you can see here, so this is where the Halifax is now, alright? And you can see the damage. These buildings, apart from this one, these two have gone, which is why Halifax is there now, but those houses are still there today, alright? Then this is a unique photograph that I've managed to find. When I've been doing research, when you look at all the towns and cities in the UK, there's not many photos. Most of them, 95%, are showing after the event has happened. So like that one there, that's after the bombs are dropped, all right? But this one is actually during the bombing, all right? Has anybody seen this photograph before? Right. There's the Never School. Notice the way it's all, the design. That is the Never School on fire, alright, during the February 3 night blitz, alright? And this photograph's been taken from where I was born, Mount Pleasant Hospital, up on top of Mount Pleasant Hill, alright? So there's the photograph, and it's going down the hill, okay? And as you can see here, there's a huge explosion, and huge bombs. So this is Castle, what's now Castle Gardens, etc., isn't it? Just over there. Alright, so this is Swansea being struck by the bombs during the February night's blitzes. Alright? Right, anybody from Mayhill, Town Hill as a child, etc.? These houses are still there today. Alright, they haven't changed. But this is Gwynedd, and the reason why these were being hit was that when I give another talk about the Swansea Blitz, the German bombers don't come in from the sea and come this way. They swing around, alright? So what they've done is they've brought the way around, coming over Casainan, coming over Manalaeth. Now there's a hill there, isn't there? So there's a hill starts, right? So you've got Gower, Manalaeth, you've got that nice hill starting all the way through to Mayhill, Town Hill. Well, that's what they followed, so that's the route. So they came over the top of Manalaeth and started dropping the bombs. So there's a couple of houses got damaged in Manalaeth. There's a farm that's still there today, and one of my father's friends, you go into where they ploughed, you can still pick up the tail fins of the incendiary bombs when he's still digging, alright? So they started bombing there, they got into Town Hill, that's where all the bombs started, Mayhill, and then into Swansea itself. They didn't care about who was going to be on the bottom of those bombs. Okay, so they struck a lot of the residential properties. So this is Gwynedd Avenue, okay, so we don't know if it's the 3 nights blitz because there were so many of them, to be honest, but that's the same photograph there again. So it's hit, and you can see the damage to it, and that's the bedroom, there's the bath, and all that there. See, so that's Gwynedd, and Tylo Crescent. Now, this, you must have seen this photograph, gang? Yeah? This is Tylo Crescent after the 3 nights blitz. Alright, what I should be doing is getting a then and now, because people are living in that street still today. However, the ferocity of the bombing from the Luftwaffe during the 3 nights blitz, this is right on the border where Swansea Town is, isn't it? Or what was Swansea Town. So you got that, Mount Pleasant, then into Swansea Town. So basically the whole street was obliterated. And there was a lot of people got killed there, women, children, middle-aged people, and a couple of men as well who were there helping out, the ARPs, Home Guard, all fire wardens, etc. And there's a memorial on Mayhill where the roundabout is. You've got the Lady of the Good Shepherd, or something, what it's called? That's it. There's a memorial there with the people who've passed away with their names on it. All right, and this is the worst passing of people, basically, and that just shows the destruction of that street at that particular time.
Those houses wouldn't have been built very long before that.
No, the 1930s.
Yeah.
It was supposed to, I shouldn't class it in 21st century, but Mayhill Town Hill was supposed to be a very posh, affluent area. My grandfather had a milk round up there. He was a farmer, he had his horse and cart, and he was selling milk from Mayhills around here in the 1930s. So it was a very, in those days, it was affluent. Now it's obviously council houses now, etc, etc. Right, this photograph, this is High Street and Landau. There's the Bush pub. I bet there's a few who had a few pints in the Bush, have you?
Yeah.
When you were younger? I know I used to, because it's still there today, the Bush, but it's not a pub anymore. As you can see, straight at the top there's the train station, there's the Bush Public House, and you've got the YMCA lorry there, and obviously what that's doing is giving teas and sandwiches to the men who are trying to dig out people from the blown up buildings around them, alright? And you can see here they've got mud all on them, you can see the stress on their faces, alright? They're all tired, they've been working all night trying to get people out of the buildings. And this one on your right is an actual photograph of an air raid shelter in Landau, alright? And it's in 1941. The house, it's right not too far away from where Swansea City have got their ground now, alright? So those houses on the left hand side in Landau. They also got bombed because you had the works were in the valleys, in the Swansea valleys. You had munitions as well, which were there in the Great War as well. So you had the copper works, you had iron works, you had the factories there. So they were a big target. And a lot of those houses, and that's a mother, children and grandparents, because obviously the husband is probably fighting overseas, and they've gone in there that night. The house in the street has gone down, but they've survived in that, and that's a newspaper cut-in photograph, and that's actually Landau, Swansea. This one is Swansea Square, which is Swansea Hospital. Alright, that doesn't escape. Was that, sorry?
Was after she was on the photo.
Oh, you on the photo? Is that you over there, is it?
That's me.
Or is that your
I'm
mum?
looking to see if I could...
Yeah, so basically the entrance to the hospital is just by her, isn't it? And they took a direct hit as well, alright? So even the hospital didn't escape it, and you can see the size of the crater there, and the nurses, and the ARP, which is Air Raid Precautions person, obviously for the photograph, but that's after the bomb has gone off. And then we all do remember Ben Evans, obviously it's David Evans when back in the 60s, 70s and what have you, people that got down. Well, you can see this is Castle Street here. That there was the Evening Post building. Just behind that is the castle, obviously, and then you've got the Castle Street with that. So these buildings here, I'm not going to put any more photographs, but obviously they were burnt out just like what St Mary's Church were, just like what Deneva School were with the incendiary bombs. Alright, so they were just a shell, but they got rebuilt in the 50s, and they're still there today, so you can still see those. But Ben Evans was totally wiped out. It had got demolished because of the bombs, and apparently this was the pinnacle of Swansea and West Wales prior to then, wasn't it? Because it was a big posh, super, Harrods of its time. Alright. Right, Anderson shelters. Those who are old enough to remember, alright, that you would have had to, as I mentioned at the one in Landau, these are Anderson shelters and they saved a lot of people's lives. Now if you were posh, alright, and you had a garden, that's what you would have, okay, and you had to pay for that. If you were working, you had to pay yourself for an Anderson shelter, but if you were on the welfare state, even those days, it didn't come in officially until after the war with the Labour government, the welfare state. If you were still part of the working class and weren't working, then you had support from the government to actually put these in. Again, this is going to be May 1940 or June or July because they've got their summer clothes on. And you can see the depth, alright? So they were built basically underground or on the level with a lot of earth over the top. And the way they were designed was any impact, force impact, would buckle them, but it generally wouldn't break down. And there's a lady there, obviously this is probably the back garden of London, or it could be Liverpool or something. And that's one there. Now these are, can you see the Anderson shelters there? That bloke is standing there because he's been in there and he survived that. Alright? Even though it's a mess, alright, people did survive those. And likewise on your right, there's an Anderson shelter. That's the only thing that's still standing as a result of the bombs that have dropped. Alright? Those who weren't lucky enough to have a Anderson shelter would have had a air raid shelter built on the street. and all that was brick walls, all right? Some are still up in Liverpool now being used for something, but if those took a direct hit, and it would have been the whole street in that, because they weren't lucky enough. And there's another one called the Morrison shelter. You've probably heard of that, yeah? Now the Morrison shelter were used for people who weren't lucky enough to have a back garden, for the Anderson shelter. Now the percentage of survivability for those was a lot less than it was with the Anderson shelters, because the Anderson's outside, not in the house. And if a bomb drops, you can get out of the Anderson shelter. Right? The trouble with this was, it's indoors, and they were designed that you could use them as a table, as a family table. However, if the air raid came and your house was bombed, you are inside that, and the only problem there is, you've got the rubble, you've got the woods, you've got the timber, you name it, it all comes down on top. So yes, you're protected, but you've got a short space of time to breathe, alright? Because you haven't got the air there, which is why you've got these men and these photographs trying to go like the clappers to try and get the rubble away, only to find people have passed away in these because they've got lack of air, alright? It was a good design, but obviously they didn't save as many people as what the Andersons did. Right, we're doing for time, we've got plenty of time, there we are. Right, rationing. Right, are we old enough to remember rationing, some of you? Right, because it didn't finish until 1954, so obviously you must have been babes in arms then. Alright, so 39, we all know about rationing. When I give the talk to the schools, they just can't understand. When I get to the bottom bit, they just think it's horrific, because how the hell can they live without sweets? But we've got here, right, so rationing came into being. They had rationing during the Great War as well, alright, just to let you know, because Germans still had submarines in World War I. But to the state, not to the extent, I should say, of what we've got in World War II. As you know, Britain is an island, alright? We can supply ourselves, however, most of our food and products come from abroad, alright? So the wheat comes from Canada, and it comes from America, etc., and the corn. Beef comes from Argentina and South America, etc., etc., right? And the bananas as well, right? Which is why I tell you why I mentioned bananas now. But because of the U-boats, we're sinking so many merchant ships, we weren't getting our supply, alright? We weren't getting our supply. So we had to ration, and it wasn't just a certain amount of people, it was everybody. You could be the Prime Minister, you could be a Duke or Duchess, or you could be a lowly labourer. This is the first time that it all worked, that everybody was together, alright? You all had the same food, okay? So what we've got here is just a person for a week, like that one is. So I'll start with our right to start with. So for an adult, for 1 week, you only had 2 to 3 pints if you were lucky, alright? I'm talking in the city here now, alright? So it could be Swansea. So 8 ounces of sugar, 1 egg a week, alright? Which is why people had hens and coops in their gardens, alright? Especially down Gower, you had a lot of chickens down there, alright? Cheese, obviously tea. Tea, when war was declared, the British government, when you say all the tea in China, right? Well, what they're saying is they bought all the available tea in the world in 1939. So even though tea was rationed to a point, it wasn't rationed as such, because we had it plentiful. The British Army and the military, well, they fought with their brew. They always had a cup of tea, and the British always liked their cup of tea. So the first thing the British did was buy 99% of all the tea. All right, and then you've got obviously the butter, etc. But then you've got, when I talk about this, jam was once a month. All right, okay, so that's Swansea, that's once a month. And obviously then you've got the meat. All right. 4 ounces only of bacon or ham. Packet of sweets was every 4 weeks. Alright? So when I give this talk to the schools, comprehensive as well, how many bags of, and they could be munching on a bag of Haribos, which could be the second of the day. Well, you'd have to wait a month for that. Now this is a child's one. It's a bit different because obviously you've got 7 pints there, because they needed the milk for their protein to make strong bones, which is very similar to that as well. Alright? So, but you all heard the dig for victory, alright? So these are the ones that are rationed, the meats, the tin beef, etc., because it's more of a extravagant food, alright? But dig for victory meant that all the gardens, all the football pitches, all the parks were all dug up, alright? And this is where allotments came into being, because I remember as a young child, my grandfather's back garden was always the allotment. Alright, there was always potatoes there, always cabbage there, always sweet there, you name it. and there was always parsley. It was always there. But that came from his mentality of when he was taken for victory during the Second World War. So the veg itself, there was loads of veg. That was never rationed. So you could have your spinaches, as I said. You could have your carrots, all right. You could have your cabbages. What else could you have? You could have turnips, all right. Anything that could be grown was grown, which is why I think we've never been so healthy as we were during the Second World War, all right. Because yeah, you had your limited, but it was good stuff, all right. Now, this talks about Swansea and Gower, all right. So I just said about Swansea, how you're limited. Gower and the rural areas are a different kettle of fish altogether, all right? So you have a jar of jam every 2 months. Down the Gower, it's not a problem. You've got your blackberries, you've got your elderflowers, you've got you name it. My nan used to make jam left, right and centre. It was coming out of our ears when I was a little kid, all right? You name it, she jammed it, okay? So jam was plentiful. Again, down Gower, not Swansea this time, 95% of people had chickens, 1 or 2 chickens in with them, so they always had the eggs. If you're on the farm, you're only allowed to have a limited amount of animals, all right? So say that you only allowed 1 pig, well, you always had a second one hidden. Right? And the story that my grandfather told me was the local Bobby from Redleston would come round, and part of his job was checking you had the right animals, all right? But he would always turn a blind eye to a bit of pork on the side. So you'd always have the second pig, and that would be slaughtered then for, say, I don't know, for the local Bobby, because he'd keep him quiet, and then your family, and then next door, and then so with Gower. And of course, when I was a child, I'd be sat on the kitchen table, and my grandfather on the other side was farming down there. He'd have wood pigeon, all right? So wood pigeon now, it's a wild bird. But they ate a lot of wood pigeon, all right? And my smallest memory of it is that he'd eat away, hear a crunch, and he spit out the shot that he shot the bird with the shotgun with. So he's eating the meat, and then he's spit in, and then the bit of shot is on the side of the plate, and then it just nice little, those my childhood memories, which he was still doing in the 70s, all right? Rabbits were available, all right? You name it, you would eat it, okay? So that's, so down Gower was a different kettle of fish altogether, okay? So Swansea was one, and then we had Black Market then, all right? So we all know what Black Market is, okay? We all had ration books, which I'll show you shortly, got one here, all right? But if you wanted your tights, if you wanted an extra egg, if you wanted an orange even, all right? You can get it, but of course it was a criminal offence to do Black Market, but if you knew somebody who had somebody who'd fallen off the back of a lorry, then there was always something there for you to have, all right?
What about bread?
Bread, yes, that was rationed as well, all right, because the wheat basically had to come from America and Canada, so that was rationed, but said it wasn't rationed to the extent of what this all was, because you had to have your bread. But if it's like World War I or Great War bread, it was getting less and less and less, so by the time you got towards 1918, it was like 70-odd% sawdust. Bread, because you could mix stuff with it, so just to add to it. Obviously with the food, I think, bread and butter pudding came into itself in World War II, from what I can gather. And there's loads of those things, and then you could make soups and make stuff out of suet pud was a nice big one as well, and that was rammed down my throat as a kid because it was the only thing to do. But yeah, that's all. Yeah, so bread would have been there, but again, you'd have to go to the bakers to show your ration book, and would be stamped, and then it'd be checked, isn't it? So you'd not be allowed to have, it's like trousers as well, shoes. Make, do and mend was the biggest thing. So instead of going to the shop to buy a new pair of trousers, you just sewed and you made it, or if you put a bit of weight on like I have, then you'd obviously just expand it with a bit of elastic, or perhaps a bit of extra cloth on one side to make it last. Obviously, as you probably know, because Swansea got hit so hard for the Blitz, that we had the King and Queen turn up, well, the Queen Mother, as we know her, which is King Charles's grandparents. So Queen Elizabeth's mum and dad. And there you can see King George VI there, and the Queen Mother, talking to the representatives of the Council of Swansea, being shown all the bomb sites. And also, Winston Churchill and his wife also came to Swansea, all right, and had a look around. Okay, and that was on the 11th of April. Right, Home Guard, I'll go through this quick, all right? So that's, I think, yes, these were on the slides before, so I'll jump to that. Right, okay, Women's Land Army then, so obviously you had the Home Guard, okay, and they were members of the public across the board. Women's Land Army are exactly the same. Now the men, basically farming was a reserved occupation, alright, you wouldn't get called up, which is my grandparents never went because they were farmers. However, if you wanted to take the King Shilling and volunteer, then that then left a big gap to be filled. So it was decided, right, okay, we'll have women now, not only to obviously on the buses and just in the munitions factory, but we come to win the Women's Land Army. So they asked for volunteers, and again, they came in their thousands to help out. Alright, so that right hand side, that's my grandmother. Alright, she's in a Women's Land Army uniform, and that's my grandfather in his Home Guard uniform. Alright, now during the war, silk was non-existent, okay, so, which is why the soldiers, if they could get silk, they kept it, and then to bring it back after. If they were one of the paratroopers, they kept their silk if they could, and then send it home so they could get their wedding dresses done. But if they didn't, people got married in what they were wearing, which is obviously their wartime uniform. And my nan, obviously, she worked on farms on Gower. She was a tenant girl, worked up in Bridgend on a couple of farms, and obviously went to a farm in Gower in the Males. And lo and behold, it's my grandfather's farm, and they all met, and the rest is history. So, but these here, it's a propaganda, because they're all smiling. Not many land girls will tell you it was a lovely, yes, you had the lovely times, because you would have had, but it was hard work. You got up early in the morning, you went to bed when it was dark.
My cousin was a land girl.
Sorry?
My cousin was a land
Yeah,
girl.
it said, you know, you played hard and you worked hard, and basically, if it wasn't for them, then you wouldn't have had any food on the plate, really. Yes, we had it coming in from the ships, but they're the ones that, and then of course then you had a second version called the Lumberjills. Alright, which were Women's Land Army, but their whole point was, and there's a lot of them in Wales, because we had a lot of forests, and their whole job was timber, alright? Because obviously because metal was at a premium, so everything was made of timber. If you had a British World War II lorry, it's 75% timber, and the rest of it's all metal, which is the chassis, but it's all wood, alright? Then, did you know that obviously Mumble's Point, Mumble's Head, had an anti-aircraft position? Yeah, you can, if you go for walks, even as a group, it's a lovely walk up there, but you can see where that was, alright? So you have Mumbles and also Ashley Road, or King the George VI Fields, as it's called, alright? So before it was the football pitches and the tennis courts and everything else, it was anti-aircraft position. So you had the ATS, or the Auxiliary Training Service, which is the women, and they were obviously staffing the searchlights. The middle photograph is an actual photograph of Ashley Road, and the gun is exactly the same model as on the anti-aircraft memorial on Fabian Way. Alright, and then the furthest one is an actual photograph of Jersey Marine. Now the reason why Jersey Marine's got anti-aircraft guns, because Llandarcy's there. Llandarcy in the Second World War was the second largest oil refinery in the UK. Hence why the Germans were blowing 10 bells out of our area and up there. Alright, and of course it had to be defended. And I'm going off tangent as well, but did you realise that Llandarcy, Britain Ferry and Jersey Marine were partly responsible for helping to do the pipeline under the ocean for D-Day?
Yes.
Operation Pluto, pipeline under the ocean. So all the pipes that got buried under the English Channel from Southampton all the way to Normandy, alright, because if you had a boat, they still had U-boats and they could sink those boats with the petrol in it. So they thought, right, okay, well we'll put it under the water and we'll pipe it all the way down. So they had the fuel that way, but it was instigated here in the Swansea area. Alright, and then if you look here, I'm assuming this doesn't work, up there you got little white dots, alright, that's Singleton Hospital today. Alright, did you know that was an American Army camp in World War II? From 1942 on. So we know this photograph is from 1942 onwards. Alright, and that building up there, that's still there today because Sketty Lane is on the top, and that's where the running track is, and that's where the changing rooms are. Here today is where the swimming pool is. Alright, and that's Ashley Road. So obviously you can see, and this is a German photograph. So the Germans knew exactly where the soldiers were camping. This is where the tennis courts are today. And you can see the anti-aircraft guns positions. The little dots that you can probably see on the map, facing out towards the sea, are concrete posts. And they were supposed to stop the German tanks from landing. But that's for another talk. Alright, and again, this is another German photograph, and they knew exactly where our positions were. So what we've got here, folks, is just like so. Single hospitals there. That's obviously that building's still there where they get changed for the university. Running tracks by there, and the swimming pools by there. Okay. Right. I give a good talk about the Gower stop line. All right, but this is a quick skim through. Now, Gower stop line quickly is that we thought the Germans were going to land. All right. Everyone thought it was going to be over in Kent from France. No, the British government were worried because Ireland was independent. Ireland hated the British with a vengeance before the war because of what took place, and they were starting to become very sympathetic with the Germans. So they were worried that they bypass there and they come all the way around through Ireland and come in through Wales. All right, so Swansea Bay, being the second highest and largest fall in the world, was a perfect landing spot, basically. Never happened, thank God. But this is Black Pill, as we know. Were you all born, folks, when the tram was about? Yeah? Well, these, do you remember concrete blocks that were next to it? Right, and those concrete blocks, they're anti-tank blocks. And they went all the way down as far as Southend. This is Norton. Alright? So what they were doing was if the Germans had actually landed in Swansea Bay, these concrete blocks are supposed to stop any tanks, lorries or landing ships to actually come onto the beach. Alright? And this is Dunvant. So this there is Garrett Avenue. Dunvant Square is just to your left, and Gowton, where the bus is going, is heading down towards Gowton. 100 feet, or 100 yards, sorry, down that way is Dunvant railway station. Alright? And there's a anti-tank position called a spigot mortar mount. That's it there in the 1950s, and that's exactly, it's there today still, it hasn't moved. And that's where it was. Unknown to me, I used to play a lot. I used to play war on that when I was a child. It's only when you grow up you realise what it actually was. Alright? And this is, you've all been for a walk-up climb. Have you seen all the pillboxes there? Yeah? Again, that's part of the stop line, because the railway line itself was, even though we all had cars, petrol was rationed, alright, because of the fact that we couldn't make petrol, it had to be imported. So the railway line, the train was always our main form of transport. And the railway line from Swansea through Clyne Valley, through Gowton, Gysain and Pontarddulais, up the mid-Wales, was the main artery to England. Alright, so if the Germans had invaded, they would have used that as a route, either to drive or whatever. So of course they had these pillboxes at certain parts, used as holding defences, so the Home Guard would have been in there protecting it. And of course, you know, this is Swansea in the war. Swansea Airport today. Have you read that the Spitfire was over there yesterday?
Yes.
Yeah? Right, well, it was a Spitfire station during the Second World War, as well as a Hurricane and a Viewfighter, etc. Alright, and a Paul Defiant, which was a night fighter. But we know this is after the war, and the reason why I know that is that we got a line of planes there. If that's during the war, do you honestly think they'll have planes for a German bomber that would just come and shoot it all down? Right, so this is after the war. This is RAF Fairwood, okay? It hasn't changed much at all, to be honest with you. The buildings have gone, but if you look on the common, the bases are still there. Alright? This is a photograph. The South Road, Bishopston and Merton and stuff are just in the background. Alright? And the South Road going towards Kittle is also in the background. And this is the main runway that you can see from the road today. And there's where the planes are lined up, and these are the actual people on the airport. And that's a photograph taken from Fairwood as well, where the mechanics are trying to fix the engine of a Paul Defiant night fighter. Alright. Right, Victory in Europe Day. So we've spoken then about World War II, how it started. Alright, we've spoken about how much the bombs. Before I go on to this, there was one story that I gave a talk to in Gleis last week, and there was a chap, he was 99 years of age, sat listening to me. And when I started talking about the Blitz, he put his arm up, which everyone was surprised about. I said, do you know the story about the shooting in Fabian Way? I did, but I always thought it was stories. But he's an actual eyewitness, and he told me basically there was a French plane in 1940, right? Flew a lone plane, right? A lone plane. French markings on it. Everyone's waving to the French plane because obviously they're allies in 1940, even though they've surrendered. We still had a lot of French people that came over, only for the French plane to start shooting at all the people in Pretendant, St Thomas, Fabian Way. 10 people dying in a shed in Swansea Docks. and he was a child at the time, 11 years of age, going to St Thomas Primary School, and he witnessed everything. So the story, so basically you had this lone wolf, they're called, a German pilot inside of a French plane, flying through and shooting at Swansea, alright? So this basically, it's a famous photograph that I managed to find online, which has been colourised, alright? And it's a VE Day photograph. But again, it's hard hitting, even though they're celebrating, they're in a bombed house there, alright? So it's like the war was still real. And not only that, basically, is that when you get talking to people, at least, which is what I've enjoyed the past week, giving a presentation about VE Day, is that there's a lot of people who were children at the time. And they were saying that even though they celebrated VE Day, it was muted a little bit because a lot of their family were still fighting the Japanese and the war was still carrying on. And there was a lot of prisoners of war being ill-treated by the Japanese, and one person piped up and said, we celebrated, we had a lovely time, but we knew the war wasn't over yet. So this is a famous photograph that's been colourised. It's clearly two sisters together, alright? And then this is Swansea, alright? So you might recognise some people, perhaps mums, dads, uncles and what have you. Now this is basically North Hill. Best way to describe it is that you come up, do you remember where the Heathcliff pub was?
Yes.
Yeah, you know that big steep hill?
Yes.
Well, as you turn right at that steep, that's it there, okay? So there, and what I want you to notice on these photographs, there's no men between 25 and 40 basically. They're either young teenagers, or they're going to be middle-aged men like myself now, alright? And a lot of women. So if you look at this one, this is obviously where that street is, and they've got, and because rationing was so big in those days, people managed to scrimp and scrape what they've had, and again, this is, the times are different, alright? Neighbours don't talk to each other these days. These were so close and talking that they got all their food together. This year is Town Hill, alright? And clearly some of the dads have come home and leave, alright? About 9 months ago. Because you've got obviously the start of the baby boom, all right, in 1945. So if you notice, you've got a couple of old, obviously middle-aged men, a lot of women, all right, and this is outside basically one of the houses in Town Hill. You notice that if you go there today, you've got that shaped house. There's always on the corner of each street. So this is just showing the photograph of the babies that were born during the war, and obviously there's no young men there because they're still fighting. You've got one there, if you notice, he's got his battle dress on, and he come home and leave when war has been, when Germany surrendered. This one again, this is going to be Lon something up in Sketty. That's it. It hasn't changed today.
No, that's been on Facebook.
Yes, that's why I've taken on Facebook. All right, so because I'm trying to find photographs of Swansea. When I've given presentations to Puff Coleman and there's hardly anything. But when you come to Swansea, it's brilliant because loads of people share it. So,
is that the road that goes up the side of what was Glanmore School?
yeah, I think it is.
So
While
that
I'm looking at it.
wall was Glanmore's?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, alright. And again, if you notice, apart from a couple of middle-aged men, they're all children and teenagers and women. Again, this far one, I can't quite work out whereabouts in Swansea it is, but I know it's a Swansea photograph. But this one's my favourite, because my wife's family are from Campbell Street, alright, which is Mount Pleasant, badly bombed during the war. And that lovely lady over there is my wife's grandfather's sister. Alright? My wife's grandfather is fighting in France, alright, and Belgium, so he's not there. Alright, and my mother-in-law's got dementia, she's 95, and she reckons, I don't think it is, because we're talking, where are you then? She thinks that's her there. Alright, which is the same age, because she would have been 11, 12 at the time. Alright, so this, and as you can see, in the background, look how decimated the area is. Alright, so this is Campbell Street at Mount Pleasant. I'm trying to remember the pub. The Mountain Dew, just keep going down past the Mount Hospital, which is just on the left-hand side. Alright? And then of course VJ Day. When you listen to all the media at the moment, they're saying VE Day and that was the end of it. Alright? But they were called the Forgotten Army even then. Alright, so you had a load of British and Commonwealth Empire troops in those days, but the Commonwealth were fighting in Burma, okay? So this meant nothing to them because they were still dying fighting the Japanese. So when they had the celebrations, if you listen to the media now and the BBC News, I just hope that they also do what they did this week for VJ Day, alright? Because VJ Day was the more important one, because that showed that that was the end of the war, end of sports, okay? And that was obviously on the 14th of August. 16th was when the fighting stopped, but the formal surrender was in Tokyo Bay on USS Missouri. Now, US Missouri was one of the ships that was sunk in Pearl Harbor, 1941. Resurrected by the American Navy, fought through the war, and basically used as the flagship for the Japanese surrender in Tokyo Bay, which is very apt. And that was the sort of major signing was the 2nd of September. This photograph is an American one, all right, where you've got the children there and the war ends. This furthest right is Thistlebourne in Mumbles, all right? And John Powell, a good friend of mine, who was a local historian down there. Sorry?
Is John Powell the weatherman?
No, not
Different one.
No, different John Powell.
Oh.
I know what you're talking about. No, different John Powell. Yeah. This is Thistlebourne Hill, right? This is where the anti-aircraft guns were still there, but they've been. But you got
At the end of
the end of evil, and then they set fire to it. All right. So I'll give. So any questions before I go into showing a bit of kit?
You will come again to do one of your...
Sorry?
You will come again to give another sip.
Oh, will I? Have you enjoyed this then, have you? Yes. Right, okay. Well, what I've got, I haven't brought much stuff with me today because obviously time was of the essence. But the clothes I'm wearing, because I've sent this quickly because I do a lot of home guards and stuff. I thought, no, it's time to do a bit of civilian stuff now. My auntie, well, my grandfather's daughter, looked and said, Jesus Christ, boy, you're like your grandfather. Pardon my French. Right, but if I put a moustache on me now, big grey moustache, and that hat on, and a walking stick, that's my grandfather back in the 1940s, apparently. So what I've got here then, is, do you remember the photographs that I showed you at the very early? So I'll start with youngest upwards, okay? I haven't got anything military gas masks, because it's not a military talk. But what I've got is, there we are, I'll bring it round. So, this is the baby's gas mask. Does this ring a bell with anybody? No? Right, okay. This is the baby's gas mask. In the beginning of my talk, you had a colour photograph with mum and dad, alright? I haven't got a doll, but I might actually go and get a doll to put it in so you can see it. And also the nurse that's holding there like that, right? So what happened is, you'll have the baby's bum will be rested in there. Okay? So the legs are dangling. Then they'd be put inside that. Alright? And you wonder why they were screaming. Have you seen the 1958 film Dunkirk with David Attenborough? Yeah, and his wife is trying to put the baby inside. Well, just watch that, just for that clip alone, because it's screaming like anything. But anyway, you put it in, you put the baby inside, then you've got these in, so you pull it, tighten it all up. That then straps, right? This baby now cannot breathe, alright? So what you've now got, you've got a pump, okay? So what would happen is, to keep the baby from breathing, or to help a breathe in, you pump in and out, right? It's claustrophobic. Thank God it was never used or even tested. But that would seal any gas from being mustard or chlorine gas, whatever the Germans would have used in those days. Alright, so the little baby's in there, and then you just keep pumping. If you stopped, the baby would obviously choke, right, and not be able to breathe. So you'd have the pump, and that's that. So that's the baby's one, okay? So this is obviously up until the age of 1. Then we'll move up an age. So if you remember the photograph I showed you earlier with a child with a funny looking mask, right? Now, leading up to the Second World War, kids loved a cartoon character called Mickey Mouse, alright? Big now, but not as big, but in those days he was one of the major characters, the cartoons, comics, you name it. Every child knew about Mickey Mouse, may have even had a toy to play with Mickey Mouse. Now, if you can imagine putting a mask on a 2 to 5-year-old, it's trouble now. I've got kids, they're all grown up now, but I know damn well they're trying to put on one of these. If I was in the war, it's mission impossible. So they invented a Mickey Mouse mask. Alright, have you all heard of Mickey Mouse mask?
Yes, I had one.
You see, kept it quiet, I thought you didn't have. Yeah, well, that's it.
That's it. But mine was coloured.
Yeah.
Red,
Yeah, well, this
Yes,
this
clear,
this was
I
red,
think.
so it was Mickey Mouse.
It is.
It was supposed to be Mickey Mouse's top, his shorts, all right, and extremely claustrophobic. Trying to get this on a little child, okay, all right. So that's the baby's gas mask, right? So that's the toddlers, all right. That's what it was called, Mickey Mouse. When you looked at that photograph, I wonder if I can go back quickly so you can just see it.
Pretty. They had red and colours in black. Yes.
Didn't know I had so many slides. Right. Next one. That one. There we are. All right. So you can see it. That's the.
Oh, yes.
So that's about a 2-3-year-old, and that's a sister, and that's the same gas mask. Extremely small, as you can tell, obviously because of the age group. But it was done in a way that, say, like, put Mickey Mouse on your face, put Mickey Mouse, and they didn't know any different. All right. Are there any ex-military here, women or men? All right. If you're I used to wear a gas mask when I was serving. It's very claustrophobic. All right. You've got to blow out to blow it out to start with, and that's the toddlers. Next one up, again with the photograph. Oh, I turned it off. Here you go. No, don't want to play those on. Right. We've then got the elder children's one. All right. So you saw the photograph with the children on the desk, practicing putting that on. All right. So you put your chin in and lift it up with the teacher showing them. That's the gas mask. Okay. All right. The adults was slightly bigger, but that's exactly the same. And there was another one that came out this way as well. This is more the standard one. All right. Now bear in mind this is This is March 1938 dated. This is 1937 dated. All right. War didn't start till the 3rd of September 1939. All right. So Britain already knew 2 years before that we would be going to war. It was just a matter of time when. All right. So what they did was they started making these in preparation just in case. So when war was declared, they could just go, okay, well, here's all your gas masks, not having to wait 6-12 months for you to be issued. So in that respect, they got things right because they said, no, even though how awful it sounds, they knew it was coming, they just didn't know when. All right, so that's that one. Then you've seen this one before. This is the Home Guard one, which is the same as the adults. All right. Now the adults would have been cardboard box, like what this is. So when you look at this is the cardboard box one, right? So you had string tied on by the side, and it'd be carried with you at all times. Had to be with you all times. Inside explains on how to look after it, how to put it on, and how to maintain it. All right. But the Home Guard had these. But if you're standing on top of 3 cliffs or Oxwich in October, November, and it's chucking down with rain, cardboard box, what happens? As I said, it comes paper mache and turns and everything falls off, doesn't it? So what they decided is that we'll put it in a tin, alright? And inside the tin, you still had instructions on how to maintain it and look after it, but they had that there, alright? And it wasn't just Home Guard, it was just the public would have had these as well, alright? For those who would be working outside a lot. So the farmers, etc., labourers, people who worked on the buses, people who worked down the coal mines, things like that, they would have these things to keep it, because it'd be damp in the coal mines. Alright? And of course you had Bevan's boys, being going off on tangent, yeah? Now they were conscripted in 1943, because all the... Yeah, oh, sorry?
My brother was one.
Yeah, because all the miners were being conscripted, even though it was a reserved occupation. And they said, right, okay, so they decided, right, we'll have a ballot then. So all these boys being conscripted in 1943, all right, thought they were going in the Merchant Navy or thought they were going in the Army, only to have their ticket lift out and say, no, you're going down the big pit in Merthyr. And that's where they stayed until 1948, apparently. So the war finished in 45, but they were still there to get the coal. So that's the helmet there. All right, so obviously you got the hat as well, which is the hat I forget because it's my grandfather, so forget that. So right, here we've got the ration. Remember, I'll pass it round if you want to. It's a little bit knackered because the kids are in schools, but you can see where you would have had it all stamped. On there would have your name and address, etc. And you'd have an ID card as well, which I haven't brought. And the ID card proves who you are. And this then shows it. So this will be going to the butchers, kind of 4 ounces, whatever the case may be, and then they mark it off there. Right, look, have a quick look and pass it round. Okay, are there any questions, gang? Because I think I'm going to be going over, aren't I? Very nearly.
Interesting.
So, are there any questions? All right.
You'd like to ask?
I'd like to know.
Girls?
I'd like to know where the sugar came for all the jam.
Yeah, sugar cane, sweetness, isn't it?
Grown
Where did it come from though?
Yeah, it came from, well, if you've got the fruit anyway, you've got the sweeteners in there,
Yes.
and you would have had the sugar rations,
Yeah.
all right, and my nan says because they weren't great sugar eaters, all right, they use it for the jam. All right, so if my grandfather had a sweet tooth, so, he'd be weaned off sugar, and it's like when I first met the wife, I used to have 3 sugars in a cup of tea. Since I married her, I'm the sugar in anything. So you can do it if you're able to do it, and you want your jams, or any preserves, then you would have used that.
My mother said she stopped taking sugar the day war started, and
Yeah.
took it again in a cup of tea.
Yeah, yeah. You don't.
Brings back
I only know that Alan's gran, who was a real fierce little character, but apparently her cupboard was always stocked with jam, but never with sugar, but one never knew where it arrived.
Yeah. But there's a wartime song, isn't it, about jam? I can't think of the name. Yeah, there's a song that
It was jam.
Yeah, jam.
In the quartermaster's store.
Yeah. No, and you can have my cheese, you can have this, but you're not having my jam.
Ah, right.
So yeah, strawberry jam obviously big in it, and marmalade even, you know. When the ration did finish, I know my nan then started moving up the world a little bit and made orange marmalade when the oranges, because the bananas didn't come back till 1954.
No.
All right.
Well, apparently my husband as well with the banana, of which he eats a banana a day now, but the family could never forget that apparently he tasted his first banana, which had taken so much effort to get, and he spat it out.
I can remember. I tried to eat mine.
Anyway, Phil, I've got to say we've all thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yes,
And
I'm coming back.
I'm going to say, please come back again. Anyway, would you like a cup of tea or coffee?
Cup of tea, please.
Cup of
Remind.
tea.
Yeah,
How
thank
many
you.
others for tea, please? And some